Hey everyone, tonight we are stepping back into a world where your very bones are the price of admission for survival. Imagine you're standing in a damp, emerald green field in the English countryside, somewhere around the mid-14th century. The air is thick with the smell of wet wool, wood smoke, and the earthy scent of churned-up mud. You aren't here for a scenic stroll. You're here because it's Sunday, and by royal decree, your afternoon belongs to the king. In front of you sits a stave of yew wood as tall as a man, seemingly as stiff as an iron bar. You reach out, your fingers calloused and stained, and you realize that to master this weapon, you won't just be building muscle, you will be literally reshaping your skeleton until it no longer resembles that of a normal human being. It's a transformation that begins in childhood and ends with a body that is a living testament to the lethality of the English longbow. Honestly, looking at the sheer tension in that string, you probably wouldn't survive this soar. At least your rotator cuffs certainly wouldn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, so please, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's always surreal to see how far these stories travel while we all tucked away in our own corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the weight of the bow in your left hand. It's heavy, but not in a way that feels balanced. It feels stubborn. This isn't the lightweight fiberglass toy you might find at a modern summer camp. This is a war bow, a weapon designed to launch a half-inch thick clotheyard shaft with enough force to punch through layered linen and tempered steel. The draw weight you're looking at is somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 150 pounds. To put that in perspective, imagine trying to lift a large grown man off the ground using only 3 fingers of your right hand. Now imagine doing that 10 times a minute, for hours, while people are screaming and trying to kill you. This is the mechanical reality of the longbow, and it is a reality that the human frame was never naturally designed to withstand. As you stand at the butts the archery targets you, look down at your younger brother. He's only 7 years old, but he's already holding a smaller, scaled-down version of the yew stave. Historians note that the English longbow was unique, not just for its design, but for the culture that supported it. While other nations relied on crossbows which, let's be honest, are basically point-and-click medieval, easy mode, the English invested in a lifelong training program. You see, a crossbow can be cocked by a mechanical crank, allowing any peasant with a functioning index finger to be lethal. But the longbow is an extension of the archer's own biology. If the archer isn't physically built into the bow is useless. You watch the boy struggle to lay his body into the bow, a phrase you'll hear often in these fields. You don't pull the string with your arm. That's a rookie mistake that leads to a popped shoulder before the first volley is even over. Instead, you keep your arm locked and use your entire back, your core, and your legs to wedge yourself between the wood and the string. It is a full-body structural compression. Because this training starts so early while the bones are still soft and the growth plates are wide open. The body treats the stress of the bow like a natural environmental factor, similar to gravity, or the way a tree grows twisted to face the wind. Interestingly, a quirky tidbit often overlooked is that the yew trees used for these bows were often imported from Spain or Italy, because the colder, slower-growing high-altitude wood was denser and more resilient than the soggy English yew. You aren't just holding a piece of wood. You're holding a piece of imported high-performance military hardware. But even the best wood is nothing without the skeletal engine that drives it. Historians still argue whether the English kings fully understood the biological toll they were demanding of their subjects, or if the skeletal warping was simply viewed as a necessary, if painful, side effect of national security. As you prepare your first shot, you feel a dull ache in your left wrist. That's the vibration shock. When you release an arrow from a bow this powerful, the energy that doesn't go into the arrow has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is your bones. The shockwaves travel up your arm, rattling your joints, and, over years of practice, causing the bone density in your left arm to skyrocket. If we were to look at your skeleton right now, or rather the skeleton you're slowly becoming, we would see that your left arm bone, the humerus, is significantly thicker than your right. Your collarbone is becoming broader, your shoulder blade is shifting its angle, and your spine is starting to take on a subtle, permanent tilt to the side. You aren't just a man who uses a bow. You are becoming a biological machine, whose primary function is to store and release massive amounts of kinetic energy. The deformation isn't a bug, it's the feature that allows you to survive. Without these changes, the sheer force of the draw would literally tear your muscles away from the bone or snap the bone itself. You are trading your long-term physical health and a straight spine for the ability to be the most feared weapon on a medieval battlefield. You take a breath, the cool evening air filling your lungs, and you prepare to draw. The string is coarse against your fingers even through the leather tabband as you settle into the stance. You feel that familiar, terrifying tension. It's a tension that will define every day of your life from now until the day you relayed in the earth, where centuries later, archaeologists will find your remains and know exactly who you were just by the shape of your shoulders. But for now, the target is waiting, the sun is setting, and the king requires your practice. You settle into the rhythm of the training ground, the thwack of hemp strings hitting leather bracers, providing a steady metronome for the afternoon. It's important to understand that you aren't here by choice or because you have a particular passion for target sports. You are here because of the Statute of Winchester and subsequent royal decrees that made this mandatory. In 1363, Edward III looked at the growing popularity of frivolous games like football, handball, and even cockfighting, and effectively banned them on Sundays. He realized that if the peasantry spent their only day of rest kicking a ball around or drinking ale, the crown's primary military advantage would wither away. You are legally required to practice, and the local constable is more than happy to fine your father if you re-caught playing soccer instead of drawing the wood. It's a bit like having a gym membership that you're legally obligated to use. Except the workout is designed to make you a human artillery piece. This state-mandated fitness program created a culture where archery was uente, an elite skill but a baseline expectation of being a man. You see the village elders watching the teenagers, nodding at those whose frames are already starting to broaden. There's a peculiar, almost grim pride in the archer's gait, the way the veterans walk with one shoulder slightly higher than the other, their chests barrel-shaped and thick. It's the look of a man who has spent 20 years resisting 100 pounds of pressure. You probably wouldn't survive the social pressure of these Sunday sessions, let alone the physical ones. Being the guy who couldn't hit the clout at 200 yards is a recipe for a very lonely existence in a medieval village. While the law demanded participation, it also shaped the very landscape of your life. Every village has its butts, those earthen mounds designed to stop stray arrows. You've grown up in their shadow. A quirky tidbit of the time is that the church was often the biggest supporter of this practice, not just out of patriotism, but because it kept the young men focused and tired, reducing the likelihood of brawls or more sinful Sunday activities. However, historians still argue whether these laws were strictly enforced across the entire kingdom or if they were more of a symbolic ideal that the crown used to keep the populace ready for the next French excursion. Regardless, for you, the law is real enough every time the bowstring bites into your fingers. As you prepare to loose another shaft, you consider the biology of what's happening beneath your skin. At your age, your bones are still in a state of remodeling. Every time you draw that bow, you are creating microfractures in your humerus and your vertebrae. In a healthy cycle, your body repairs these microfractures by depositing more calcium, making the bone denser and thicker than it was before. This is Wolff's law: an action bone grows in response to the loads placed upon it. But because you are loading only one side of your body with such extreme force, you are essentially growing lopsided. Your left arm, which holds the bow steady and absorbs the massive shock of the release, is becoming a pillar of solid ivory. Your right arm, which draws the string, is developing massive muscle attachments at the shoulder, pulling the bone into new, strange shapes. There is a specific kind of archery fatigue that sits deep in your marrow. It's not the burn of a modern bicep curl. It's a deep, structural ache that tells you your skeleton is being forged. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our previous talks about ancient survival? Well, you'd probably trade a gallon of it for some modern ibuprofen right now. The medieval solution for this kind of soreness is usually a bit of lard rubbed into the joints, or if you're lucky, some willow bark, Tytha, ancestor of aspirant, to take the edge off the inflammation. But the pain is just a signal that the transformation is working. You are setting your frame. You watch an older archer, a man in his 40s who has survived the wars in Gascony. He moves with a stiffness that looks like a lack of flexibility, but it's actually structural stability. When he draws his bow, he doesn't wobble. His skeleton has become so reinforced that he is effectively a biological tripod. His ribs on the left side are noticeably thicker, providing a rigid cage to support the lungs and heart against the crushing pressure of the draw. This isn't just getting in shape, this is a permanent, irreversible change. If this man were to stop archery tomorrow, his bones wouldn't just go back to normal. He is marked for life. The social expectation is that by the time you are 16, you should be able to handle a bow of at least 100 pounds. To get there, you've spent your childhood stepping up, starting with a 30 pounds bow, then a 50, then an 80. Each jump in weight feels like a mountain you'll never climb, until one day, the bone density catches up. The tendons thicken like heavy-duty cables, and the weight that once felt like it would snap your ribs now feels manageable. It's a slow-motion evolution of the individual. You aren't just a peasant anymore. You are a specialist. Think about the sheer dedication this requires. Every single week, rain or shine, through the mud of winter and the heat of summer, the law demands this of you. It's a collective biological investment. The King of England doesn't have a standing army in the modern sense. He has a nation of men whose skeletons have been modified by law to serve as his primary weapon system. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the butts, you realize those shadows look exactly like your own future, elongated, slightly bent, and incredibly strong. You reach for another arrow, your fingers finding the nock by instinct, and you prepare to lay your body into the wood once again. As you stand there, your feet planted firmly in the cooling earth, you have to unlearn everything you think you know about pulling a bow. If you try to use your arm muscles, your biceps, and your deltoids to bring that string back to your ear, you will fail before you even reach half draw. Worse, you'll probably hear a sickening pop as your shoulder joint gives up the ghost. No, the anatomy of the pull is a sophisticated dance of structural alignment. You aren't pulling the string so much as you are expanding your chest and pushing the bow away from you, while simultaneously locking your back muscles. It's a technique called drawing under the ear, and it requires you to treat your entire skeletal structure like a folding scissor jack. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer frustration of trying to master this without a veteran sergeant yelling at you to stop acting like a weak-armed weaver. The mechanical secret lies in the large muscles of the back, the rhomboids, and the trapezius. When you begin the draw, you lock your left arm into a position of skeletal stacking. This means your wrist, elbow, and shoulder are aligned in a straight, rigid line so that the 150 pounds of pressure isn't being held up by muscle tension alone, but is being driven straight into the bones of your arm and across your chest. You are essentially turning your left side into a wooden post. Meanwhile, your right hand, hooked onto the string with 3 fingers, is driven back by the rotation of your shoulder blade. You aren't pulling with your hand. You are throwing your elbow backward using the massive leverage of your back. This shift in mechanics is what allows a man to hold that soul-crushing weight for the few seconds needed to aim. A quirky, often forgotten detail about this process is the archery kiss. To ensure a consistent draw length, many archers bring the string back until the fletching of the arrow, or the string itself, just brushes against their lips or the tip of their nose. It's a moment of intimate, terrifying contact with a weapon that could kill you if the wood decided to splinter. You can feel the vibration of the tension humming through your teeth. Historians still argue whether the English archers used a floating anchor point or if they truly locked the hand against the jawbone. Every single time, but regardless of the specific style, the physical demand remains the same: total skeletal commitment. As the string reaches full draw, your body is under more pressure than a modern diver at depth. Your ribs are being compressed, your spine is being twisted, and your heart has to pump blood against the massive muscular contraction of your entire upper torso. This is where the lifelong training pays off. Because you started this as a child. Your ligaments, the ropes that hold your bones together, have thickened and become less elastic, more like steel cables. In a normal person, this much pressure would cause the shoulder to sublux or partially dislocate. In you, the joint is so reinforced by years of repetitive heavy loading that it stays seated even as the humerus is forced back into the socket with enough power to crush a grapefruit. You also have to consider the role of the archery lung. You learn to hold a half-breath during the draw to create an internal air cushion for your ribcage. If you exhale completely, your chest collapses and you lose the structural rigidity needed to keep the bow steady. If you inhale too deeply, The tension of the jaw combined with the lung pressure makes you lightheaded. It's a delicate, practiced balance. You are literally using your internal organs as a pressurized support system for your skeleton. It is a bit of biological engineering that would make a modern sports scientist weep with both admiration and horror. There's a common misconception that archers were just big guys. In reality, the skeletal evidence suggests that while they were incredibly strong, their strength was specialized. You might have the forearms of a blacksmith and the back of a stonecutter, but your body is shaped specifically for this one asymmetrical movement. This is why, in the village, people can spot an archer from a mile away. You walk with a certain cant to your frame. Your right side, the pulling side, often has a much larger scapular wing. Your shoulder blade literally sticks out further, because the muscles underneath it have grown so thick they've pushed the bone away from the ribcage. It's not a gym belt physique, it's a combat belt distortion. Think about the sheer repetition required to make this bone stacking second nature. During a 4-hour practice session, you might loose 100 arrows. That's 15,000 pounds of cumulative pressure moved by your skeleton in a single afternoon. Over a decade, that's millions of pounds. Your bones are essentially being cold forged. Every time you lock that left arm and rotate that right shoulder, you are telling your body that the environment is one of extreme crushing tension, and your body responds by turning your frame into a fortress of calcium and collagen. You release the string. The arrow vanishes in a blur, and the bow jumps in your hand. The sudden release of 150 pounds of tension sends a violent recoil shock back through your arm and into your shoulder. It's a jarring, tooth-rattling sensation that you've become immune to, but it's doing work on your joints every single time. It's the sound of the clack as the arrow leaves the shelf and the thrum of the string that stays in your ears long after you've gone to bed. You take a moment to shake out your hand, watching the blood flow back into your white-knuckled fingers, and then you reach for the next shaft. The cycle begins again. Stack the bones, rotate the back, find the kiss, and let the skeleton do the work that the muscles cannot. To truly understand why your body looks the way it does, we have to go back, way back. Before you even had your first real pair of boots, you're 7 years old, and while most kids today are learning to tie their shoes or navigate a tablet, you are being handed a stick of you that's taller than you are. This is where the real magic of skeletal deformation happens. You see, a child's skeleton isn't the solid, brittle stone we often imagine. It's more like green wood or stiff clay. Your growth plates, those specialized areas of cartilage at the ends of your long bones, are wide open and incredibly sensitive to mechanical stress. By starting you now, the English military machine is hijacking your natural growth process. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer boredom of these early drills, let alone the physical toll. But in the 14th century, this is just what growing up looks like. As a child, your bones are in a constant state of flux, governed by a process called modeling. Normally, this process ensures your limbs grow straight and symmetrical. But the longbow introduces a massive, recurring, asymmetrical insult to that growth. Every time you struggle to bend your training bow, you are applying a bending force to your forearm and a compression force to your spine. Because you are so young, your body doesn't just repair the stress, it adapts the blueprint of your entire frame to accommodate it. It's like training a bonsai tree. If you start when the branch is thick, it snaps. If you start when it's a sapling, you can make it grow in a complete circle. A quirky tidbit from the medieval records is that many young boys were given practice bows made of cheaper ash or hazel, which were more forgiving than you but still required the same fundamental movements. These weren't toys, they were orthopedic tools. You'd spend hours just aiming at the sky or at a distant tree, holding the tension until your little arm shook, all to teach your nervous system and your soft skeleton how to lock into place. Historians still argue whether the English intentionality behind this child start was a stroke of genius or a desperate response to the sheer difficulty of the weapon, but the result was the same. A generation of men whose bodies were literally built for war from the marrow up. As you grow, your humerus, the bone in your upper arm, begins to respond to the tension of the jaw in a very specific way. In a normal person, the humerus is relatively cylindrical. In you, the archer in training, the bone starts to develop a torsion or a twist. Because you are constantly rotating your shoulder under heavy load, the bone itself begins to spiral slightly along its axis. This isn't a break or a deformity in the sense of a disease. it's a structural reinforcement. This twist allows your muscles to gain better leverage, essentially giving you internal gears that a regular person simply doesn't possess. By the time you hit your teenage growth spurt, this twist is locked in a permanent part of your biological architecture. Then there are the growth plates themselves. Under the constant heavy pounding of archery practice, the growth plates in your left arm, the bow arm, often stay active longer or respond by creating a much thicker layer of cortical bone, the hard outer shell. This makes your left arm not just stronger, but perceptibly denser and heavier than your right. If you were to jump into a lake, you might almost feel like one side of you wants to sink faster than the other. You're becoming a living contradiction. A human being with the lopsided symmetry of a fiddler crab, all because the king needs his arrows to fly further than the French can run. You also have to consider the acromion, that little shelf of bone on top of your shoulder. In a normal child, this fuses into a solid piece of the shoulder blade during adolescence. But for you, the constant extreme pressure of the longbow draw can actually interfere with this fusion. Sometimes it stays as a separate piece of bone, connected by strong ligaments, a condition called ossicration. While a modern doctor might see this as an injury, for you, it's a specialized joint that allows your shoulder a greater range of motion and more stability under the crushing weight of a 140 pounds draw. You are literally evolving a new joint to cope with your job. Think about the psychological effect of this. You don't just go to work as an archer. You are an archer in every fiber of your being. When you go to the tavern or the market, you can see the other boys who have been through the same U-mill. You recognize the slight tilt of the head, the way the left shoulder sits a bit lower and broader than the right. It's a secret brotherhood written in bone. You are all part of a grand biological experiment in national defense. Your childhood wasn't spent playing, it was spent being forged. By the time you reach your 18th birthday, the clay of your skeleton has hardened. The growth plates have closed, the bone density has peaked, and the torsion in your limbs is permanent. You have successfully navigated the most dangerous gym in history. You now possess a frame that can withstand forces that would snap a modern athlete's S-arm like a dry twig. You stand at the butts, looking at the heavy war bow that used to look like a mountain, and you realize it feels like a part of you. It should your body literally grew around the requirement to bend it. You reach for your quiver, the movement fluid and natural, and you prepare to show the world what a decade of skeletal remodeling can really do. As you transition from a youth in training to a man of the ranks, you begin to notice a permanent change in how you stand when you are uneven holding a bow. This is the archery spinal curvature, a lateral deviation of the spine that historians and bioarchaeologists have documented. In nearly every well-preserved archer's skeleton, because the act of drawing a longbow is so violently asymmetrical, with your left side pushing with rigid pillar-like force and your right side pulling with a massive rotational contraction or vertebrae, have started to respond to the uneven load. Over years of Sunday practice and campaign service, your spine doesn't just bend. It reshapes itself to create a more stable platform for those 100-pound draws. You probably wouldn't survive the long-term postural issues this causes in the modern world without a dedicated physical therapist and a very ergonomic office chair. If you were to look at your back in a polished bronze mirror, you'd see that your spine makes a subtle S or C curve. This isn't scoliosis in the traditional sickly sense. It's a functional adaptation. The metallothoracic vertebrae actually begin to wedge slightly. They grow thicker on one side than the other to accommodate the way you lay your body into the bow. By creating this permanent lean, your skeleton is essentially preloading itself. You aren't fighting your spine to get into the shooting stance anymore. Your spine has already arrived there. You've become a human torsion spring, always slightly wound, even when you're just sitting at a tavern table nursing a horn of ale. A quirky, somewhat grim tidbit of the medieval period is that this archer S-hump, or tilted frame, was so common that it became a way for people to identify English spies or soldiers in foreign lands. If you were traveling through France and saw a man with one shoulder significantly more developed and a spine that leaned away from his arm, you didn't need to see his quiver to know he was a threat. Historians still argue whether this spinal deformation caused significant nerve impingement or if the massive wall of muscle built up around the spine acted as a biological brace that prevented the worst of the pain until old age. For you, however, it's just the price of being the most lethal man on the field. This spinal shift also changes the way your ribcage sits. Your ribs, on the left side, the side that faces the enemy and holds the stave, have become more robust. They are spaced slightly further apart to allow for the massive expansion of the lungs and the stabilization of the chest cavity. On your right side, the ribs are often more compressed, tucked in tight, to allow the drawing shoulder blade to slide back with maximum efficiency. You are literally asymmetrical from the inside out. When you take a deep breath, your chest doesn't expand evenly. It swells with a lopsided power that looks, to the uninitiated, almost monstrous. The ligaments connecting your vertebrae have also undergone a transformation. In a normal person, the spine is designed for flexibility for twisting, bending, and reaching. In you, the English warbow machine, those ligaments have partially calcified, turning from stretchy bands into something more like biological rope. This loss of flexibility is a trade-off for incredible structural rigidity. When the string reaches your ear and the 150 pounds of pressure tries to collapse your torso, your stiff spine holds firm. You are a living monument to the principle that form follows function, and your function is to be an immovable anchor for a piece of yew wood. You might remember how we talked about the archery kiss and the contact with the face. Well, the spinal tilt affects your aim too, because your head sits differently on a tilted neck. Your master eye has to compensate for the slight angle of your skull. You've learned to look through the tilt. This isn't something you think about, it's just how you see the world. When you look at a target 200 yards away, your brain automatically adjusts for the fact that your shoulders aren't level and your spine is curved. It's a specialized form of proprioception, the body's internal sense of where it is in space that is unique to your profession. Think about the sheer weight of your equipment for a moment. You aren't just carrying a bow, you're carrying a sheaf of 24 heavy iron-tipped arrows, a buckler, perhaps a short sword or a maul, for when things get messy in your own specialized body. Every step you take on a long march through the French countryside is filtered through that curved spine. By the end of a day's march, the ache isn't in your legs. It's in the small of your back, where the skeletal deformation meets the reality of gravity. You've traded the straight-backed dignity of a knight for the hunched, terrifying efficiency of the archer. As you stand at the butts today, the sergeant notices your stance and nods. He doesn't see a deformity, he sees a veteran. He sees a man whose body has successfully set into the shape of the weapon he carries. You draw your bow, and the curve of your spine aligns perfectly with the curve of the wood. For a brief second, there is no distinction between the man and the bow. You are a single, cohesive unit of kinetic potential. You release, the arrow screams into the sky. And as you relax, your spine settles back into its new normal curva permanent signature of your service to the crown, written in bone and shadow, while the outward curve of your spine and the lopsided set of your shoulders are visible to any passerby. The most dramatic changes are happening deep beneath the skin at the microscopic level of your bone tissue. If we were to take a cross-section of your humerus, the large bone of your upper arm, we wouldn't see a normal, hollow-looking tube. Instead, we would find a bone that has undergone massive cortical thickening. The cortex is the hard, dense outer shell of the bone, and in a longbowman, this shell can become nearly twice as thick as that of a contemporary laborer or even a knight. Your body is essentially reinforcing its own internal chassis to prevent the sheer torque of the bow from snapping your arms like dry kindling. You probably wouldn't survive the intense heat of this cellular remodeling without modern hydration, but your medieval self just calls it the Sunday burn. This process is a beautiful, if brutal, example of biological engineering. Every time you release an arrow, a massive wave of kinetic energy, one that didn't quite make it into the shaft rebounds through the bow and into your skeletal frame. This creates micro-insults to the bone matrix. In response, your osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building bone, go into a state of hyperdrive. They don't just repair the damage, they overbuild the area, depositing layers of hydroxyapatite and collagen with a density that rivals some hardwoods. By the time you've been shooting for a decade, your left arm isn't just a limb, it's a biological strut of immense structural integrity. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit that historians sometimes whisper about is that this bone density was so extreme that some medieval archers were reportedly heavy sinkers in water. There are anecdotal accounts of archers falling overboard during channel crossings and sinking like stones because their skeletons were so much heavier than the average person. S, while that might be a bit of period exaggeration, the science holds up. Your bones are literally more massive than those of the people around you. Historians still argue whether this increased density made archers more prone to brittle fractures in old age, or if the accompanying thickening of the tendons provided a protective buffer that kept them mobile well into their 50s. As you look at your forearms, you notice they aren't just muscular, they are wide. The two bones of the forearm, the radius and the una, have actually bowed outward slightly. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's a reaction to the massive interosseous pressure. The muscles that control your grip and stabilize your wrist are anchored between these two bones, and as those muscles grow to the size of small stakes, they pull on the bone, encouraging it to curve to create more surface area for muscle attachment. It's like a bridge being reinforced with extra steel cables. The structure has to change shape to accommodate the new tension. You also have to consider the marrow factor. With the thickening of the cortical bone, the internal marrow cavity where your body produces blood cells actually becomes more compressed. This leads to a fascinating speculation. Did the elite archer's body prioritize structural strength over hematological efficiency? You might be the strongest man in the village, but your body is operating on a razor's edge of specialization. You are a war machine in every sense, optimized for the brief, violent exertion of the volley, even if it means your body has to work harder to produce the very blood that fuels those muscles. There is also the matter of the deltoid tuberosity. This is the specific spot on your humerus where the deltoid muscle attaches. In a normal human, it's a small, slightly rough patch of bone. In you, it has become a jagged, protruding ridge. The bone has literally grown out to meet the muscle, creating a more powerful lever. When you lift your arm to the side, that ridge acts as a mechanical advantage, allowing you to hold the bow steady for those agonizing seconds of aiming. It's a specialized tool, grown from your own DNA, shaped by the weight of the you carry every Sunday. Remember that crocodile dung we joked about? Well, you might find yourself wishing for a bit of it to soothe the heat in your arms after a long day at the butts. That heat is the feeling of your bones remodeling. It's a dull, throbbing ache that stays with you through the night. Literal growing pain that never truly goes away as long as you continue to shoot. You've learned to live with it, much like you've learned to live with the permanent calluses on your fingers. It's the sound of progress. As you finish your set and lower the bow, you can feel the weight of your own arms. They feel solid in a way that's hard to describe to someone who has felt it. You aren't just a man with big muscles, you're a man with a heavy-duty frame. You reach out to grab your water skin, and the movement is steady, devoid of any tremor. Your bones are now so dense, and your attachments so secure, that the bow, the 150 pounds monster, now feels like a natural part of your reach. You have successfully turned your skeleton into a fortress, and as long as that fortress holds, the king's enemies have a very, very long day ahead of them. If we were to travel forward in time, past the smoke of the 100 Years' War and the reign of the Tudors, we would find the absolute smoking gun of everything we've been discussing. In 1545, Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose, sank in the Solent during an engagement with the French. When she was raised in 1982, she wasn't just a ship, she was a time capsule of biological data. Among the silt and the timber, archaeologists found the remains of the ship's elite archery company. These weren't just any soldiers, they were the king's finest, and their skeletons provided the first undeniable bioarchaeological proof of the lifelong skeletal deformation. You are currently undergoing. Scientists looking at these bones were stunned by what they said was as if they were looking at a different subspecies of human. You probably wouldn't survive the deep-sea pressure of that shipwreck, but your bones would certainly leave a story for the divers to find. The Mary Rose skeletons showed a level of asymmetry that was almost cinematic. The humerus, the upper arm bone of the left arm, was consistently and significantly larger in diameter than the right. We aren't talking about a subtle difference. In some cases, the bowworm bone was 25% to 30% thicker. This is the ultimate mainstream historical fact of the Longbowmen as life, the Mary Rose archery syndrome. When researchers measured the bone density, they found it was off the charts compared to the sailors and even the officers on the same ship. These men were biological anomalies, shaped by the requirements of their 150-pound U-bows. Their bones were so reinforced that even after 400 years under the sea, the evidence of their Sunday practices remained etched in the calcium. A quirky and somewhat fringe tidbit from the Mary Rose excavation is that many of the archers showed signs of ossacromial, that unfused shoulder bone we mentioned on both sides, but it was far more pronounced on the pulling side. Some researchers even found that the archers had developed unique pitting or furrows in their neck vertebrae. This has led to an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this neck damage was caused by the archery, kiss, and the violent vibration of the string against the jaw, or if it was the result of the archers carrying their heavy equipment and sheaves of arrows in a specific neck-straining way during long marches. Whatever the cause, the neck of a longbowman was just as warped as his shoulders. When you look at these skeletons, you also see the ossification of the muscle attachments. In several of the Mary Rose remains, the tendons where the pectoralis major and the latissimus dorsi muscles attached to the bone had actually begun to turn into bone themselves. This is called enthesopathy. Essentially, the muscles were pulling so hard, so often, that the body decided the only way to keep the muscle attached was to turn the connection point into solid stone. It's a bit like trying to bolt a jet engine to a wooden plane. You have to replace the wood with steel. In your case, that steel is extradens bone. The find also revealed a startling truth about the age of these men. Despite the lifelong training, many of the archers on the Mary Rose were in their late teens and early 20s, yet their skeletons looked like they belonged. Two men in their 50s who had spent a lifetime in a rock quarry. The wear and tear of the longbow was an accelerated aging process. Your joints are being spent to pay for the power of your shot. While you feel invincible today, the Mary Rose tells us that your frame is a candle burning at both ends. The very adaptations that make you a legendary soldier are the ones that will eventually make every movement a chore. There's also the fascinating detail of the archery teeth. Many of the skeletons showed specific wear patterns on the molars and incisors. It is believed that archers often used their teeth as a third hand when stringing their bows or making quick repairs to their gear in the heat of battle. You might find yourself biting down on a leather thong or a hemp string while your hands are busy with a heavy yew-stave. This has left a permanent record in your enamella literal bite mark of your profession. You aren't just using your skeleton to shoot, you're using your entire anatomy. Think about what this means for your legacy. Long after the French are gone, long after the king is a memory, your bones will remain as a physical document of the work you did. The Mary Rose archers didn't have names recorded in the ship's manifest, but they didn't need them. Their stories were written in the torsion of their humeri and the curvature of their spines. When the archaeologists first pulled those bones from the mud, they knew exactly who those men were. They weren't just sailors. They were the English archers, the men who held the line. You reach for another arrow, your fingers tracing the smooth ash of the shaft. You can feel the tension in your own shoulder, and for a moment, you wonder if you'll end up like the men on the ship preserved in the silt, a mystery of bone and grit. But the sergeant's voice snaps you back to the present. There's no time for such thoughts. You have a target to hit, a law to obey, and a body that is still, for now, yours to command. You lay into the bow once more, the wood groaning in sympathy with your skeleton, and you release. As you continue your long-term transformation into a human war machine, we need to focus on the pivot point of your entire operation, the shoulder. In a typical human, the shoulder is a masterpiece of mobility, but a disaster of stability. It's basically a golf ball sitting on a saucer. However, for you to hold a 150-pound draw without your arm flying off, toward the target, your body has to undergo a very specific failure of development known as ossacromial. Remember how we mentioned the acromion, that little shelf of bone at the top of your shoulder blade? In a normal person, the three separate centers of ossification in that bone fuse together into one solid piece by age 25. But in your case, the constant massive pressure applied to that joint during your teenage growth spurts often prevents that fusion from ever happening. You probably wouldn't survive the psychological distress of being told you have a broken shoulder today. But in the 14th century, this failure is actually your greatest asset. Having an ossacromial essentially means your shoulder has an extra unintended joint, because the bone remains in 2 or 3 pieces connected by strong fibrous tissue rather than a solid bridge of calcium. It allows for a give and a range of motion that a fused shoulder simply doesn't have. This allows you to rotate your drawing shoulder further back, tucking your shoulder blade closer to your spine and creating a more stable lock for the draw. It's like having a custom-engineered shock absorber built into your skeleton. Historians still argue whether this condition was a painful hindrance in daily life or if the surrounding musculature knows. Massive slabs of trapezius and deltoid clamped down on the area so tightly that the archer never even felt the looseness of the bone. A quirky fringe tidbit about this condition is that it appears in medieval archers at a rate much higher than the general population, sometimes up to 40% in archer remains, compared to maybe 5% in modern sedentary humans. This isn't a genetic fluke, it's a stress-induced developmental delay. Your body is literally being bullied by the bow into staying young and flexible in that one specific spot, while the rest of your skeleton is being forced to age and thicken at double speed. You are a walking paradox of hyperstability and hypermobility. But this extra joint comes with a price. While it helps you reach that full ear-tugging draw length, it also puts immense pressure on the rotator cuff tendons that have to snake underneath that bone. You likely spend your evenings with a dull, hot ache radiating from the top of your shoulder down to your elbow. This is the feeling of impingement. In the medieval world, there's no physical therapy or steroid injections. You might rub some oil of St. John's wort or simple animal fat into the skin, but mostly, you just develop a high tolerance for chronic inflammation. You've traded the long-term health of your shoulder joint for the ability to pierce a French knight-esque breastplate at 200 paces. Then there is the glenoid fossa, the socket part of the shoulder. In the Mary Rose skeletons, researchers found that this socket was often enlarged and tilted upward in archers. This shift in the saucer helps to better support the golf ball, the head of your humerus, when your arm is raised and under tension. Your body is essentially reshaping the socket to ensure that when the 150 pounds of force comes screaming through your frame, your arm stays firmly attached to your torso. It is a masterpiece of biological retooling. You aren't just using your shoulder. You are reinventing what a shoulder can do. Think about the sheer precision of this. If the bone fused, you'd lose that extra inch of draw length. If the socket didn't tilt, you'd dislocate. Every Sunday, you are fine-tuning this biological machinery. You might notice that your archery shoulder actually sits higher than your other one when you re-relaxed, giving you a slightly predatory, hunched appearance. It's a look that says you spent more time with a bow than with a plow. In a medieval tavern, a man's silhouette tells his whole life story before he even opens his mouth to order a pint. Interestingly, this shoulder shift also affects how you breathe during a volley. Because your shoulder blades are being forced into such extreme positions, they compress the upper lobes of your lungs. You've had to learn how to belly breathe, using your diaphragm to pull air deep into your lower torso, while your upper chest remains a rigid, locked-in cage of bone and muscle. It's a specialized way of existing. You are breathing like a singer, standing like a statue, and pulling like a titan. As you reach for your next arrow, you feel that familiar click in your shoulder, the os acromial shifting slightly as you raise the bow. To anyone else, it might be a sign of injury, but to you, it's the sound of the machine engaging. You lay into the bow, the extra mobility allowing you to find that perfect anchor point under your ear. The tension is immense, but your reshaped shoulder socket holds firm, and your unfused acromion gives you just enough play to fine-tune your aim. You release, the arrow flies true, and the shock of the release is absorbed by your custom-built biological struts. You are a marvel of accidental engineering, a man whose very defects have made him the king of the battlefield. As you stand at the butts, the weight of the bow is manageable, but your hands tell a different story. To the casual observer, they look like the hands of a laborer, but a closer look reveals a specialized anatomy. Your right hand you're drawing hand is a study in extreme adaptation. You use what's known as the Mediterranean draw, placing 3 fingers on the string, the index, middle, and ring, even through a thick leather tab. The pressure of a 150 pounds draw is enough to cut through soft flesh like a wire through cheese. Over time, your fingers haven't just grown calluses, the very joints have thickened. The distal phalanges, the tips of your fingers have developed a broader, flatter surface area to distribute that soul-crushing pressure. You probably wouldn't survive the loss of sensation this causes in the modern world. Imagine trying to type a text or pick up a coin when your fingertips feel like solid oak. This thickening isn't just skin deep. The tendons that run along the back and palm of your hand have become as thick as ship's rigging. In the Mary Rose skeletons, researchers found that the attachment points for these tendons on the finger bones were exceptionally pronounced, showing Bony spurs, where the body had literally grown more bone to prevent the tendons from ripping away during a high-tension release. Your grip isn't just muscle, it's a mechanical lock. When you hook onto that hamstring, you aren't holding it in the way you'd hold a spoon. You are hooking a biological crane onto a load. A quirky tidbit that often gets left out of the history books is the archer's nerve. Because of the constant pressure on the fingers, many longbowmen likely suffered from permanent numbness or pins, and needles in their drawing hand condition, similar to modern carpal tunnel, but localized to the fingertips. Historians still argue whether this loss of sensation was actually an advantage, allowing the archer to ignore the pain of the string bite during a long battle, or if it made them clumsier with other tools, like a knife or a needle. For you, it just means you do unfeel the cold quite as much in those 3 fingers when the winter frost hits the training ground. Your left hand, the bow hand, has its own set of modifications. While the right hand is about tension and hook, the left is about compression and stability. You grip the U stave in the V between your thumb and index finger, and as the bow is drawn, the wood tries to crush your metacarpal bones together. In response, the ligaments in your palm have tightened and thickened, creating a rigid cradle for the bow. You might notice that you can't quite flatten your hand out on a table anymore. It naturally wants to cup, as if it's waiting for the bow to return. It's a permanent ghost of the weapon you carry. The skin on your hands is another marvel. It's not just rough, it's transformative. The friction of the arrow S-fletching passing over your left hand, if you aren't wearing a glove, can strip skin in a heartbeat. You've developed a leathering of the skin on your thumb and the back of your hand. It's a biological armor that is constantly shedding and renewing, much faster than a normal person's. You are quite literally growing your own protective gear. If you were to touch someone with those hands, they wouldn't feel the warmth of skin. They'd feel the dry, hard texture of a tool. There's also the matter of vibration damage. When that arrow is loosed, the bow kicks. That energy travels through the palm of your left hand and into the small bones of the wristocarpals. Over years, these bones can actually begin to fuse or develop early-onset osteoarthritis. You might find that on cold, damp mornings, your wrist feels like it's been filled with sand. This is the clink in the machine. Your skeleton is incredibly strong, but the joints are the sacrificial anodes of your body, wearing down so the rest of the structure can perform. Think about the dexterity you've lost to gain this power. You can't play a lute with much grace, and your handwriting, if you can write at Alice, likely a shaky mess. But when you wrap those fingers around a 150-pound bow, they are the most reliable tools in England. You are a specialist of the highest order. Your hands are no longer meant for the delicate work of peace. They are the terminal points of a weapon system that has been loading since you were 7 years old. As you prepare to nock another arrow, you look at those 3 fingers on your right hand. They are stained with the oils of the yew and the wax of the string. They look older than the rest of you, Nareld, powerful and slightly bent. You hook them onto the string, and the familiarity is a comfort. The pain of the pressure is there, lurking behind the numbness, but it's a good pain. It's the feeling of the tool fitting the hand. You pull the bones of your hand locking into their reinforced grooves, and you prepare to let the wood speak through your iron-thickened grip. As you stand on the practice range, the bow in your hand feels less like a tool and more like a biological extension of your reach. To understand why your body has to deform so drastically, you have to understand the material you are wrestling with, the Italian yew. This isn't just a piece of wood. A longbow is a complex 2-layered machine. The outer layer, the sapwood that faces away from you, is incredibly elastic. It loves to be stretched. The inner layer, the heartwood that faces your chest, is dense and resists being squashed. When you draw the bow, these 2 layers act like a natural spring and a natural pillar fighting against each other. To master this tension, your skeleton has to become the 3rd layer of that machine. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer physical labor of working the wood before you even start shooting. But for you, the bow is a living partner. A quirky, somewhat obscure tidbit is that medieval bowyers would often leave a tiny nub or horn of wood at the tips of the bow to hold the string. These were eventually replaced by actual horn nocks carved from the horns of cows or goats. These nocks acted like a primitive sighting system. You'd look past the curve of the top horn to align your shot. Historians still argue whether the English archers preferred self-bows made of a single piece of wood or if they experimented with early laminates. But the consensus remains that the high-latitude yew was the gold standard. Its density was so high that it required your bones to match it in structural integrity, or the wood would simply win the fight. This symbiotic relationship between wood and bone is visible in the way you maintain your weapon. You spend your evenings rubbing beeswax into the grain to keep out the damp English moisture. But that same wax ends up embedded in the deep calluses of your palms. Over time, your skin and the wood start to share the same chemical profile. You can tell by the feel of the stave if it's thirsty for oil or if the core is starting to fatigue. This sensory connection is only possible because your nervous system has been tuned to the bow's vibration. Every time you loosed an arrow as a child, the frequency of the yew was calibrated into your developing arm bones. Interestingly, the yew tree itself is toxic. Every part of it, except the red fleshy berry, contains taxine alkaloids that can stop a heart. There's a fringe theory that Longbowmen, by constantly handling these staves and occasionally biting down on the wood during a frantic stringing, might have built up a microtolerance or suffered from mild chronic taxine exposure. This could explain some of the archery jitters or the intense focus noted in veteran companies. You are essentially wielding a poisonwood staff that demands your body become as tough as its own toxic fibers. When you lay your body into the bow, you are performing a feat of engineering called compression loading. The bow wants to return to its straight shape, and it uses your skeleton as the lever to prevent it. Because the yew is so unforgiving, your collarbones, the clavicles, have become noticeably thicker and more curved. This curvature creates a better arch to distribute the weight across your upper ribcage. You are building a Gothic cathedral of bone to support the weight of the king's ambitions. If your bones were straight, the yew would snap them. Because they are deformed and arched, they are invincible. Think about the journey that wood took to get to your hand. It was harvested in the mountains of the Mediterranean, seasoned for years, and then shipped across the continent because English wood was too soft. It is a high-performance material that demands a high-performance human. You aren't just a peasant with a stick. You are the inducer of a global military supply chain. Your skeletal deformation is the final assembly of this weapon system. Without your warped spine and thickened humerus, that expensive Italian yew is just a very stiff, very toxic piece of decorative lumber. The bow also dictates your stature. A longbow is usually between 70 and 80 inches long. To use it effectively, you have to be tall enough to clear the ground with the bottom limb while maintaining a full draw. This is why archers were often the tall men of the village. The physical requirement for height, combined with the skeletal broadening of the shoulders, made you a literal giant among the medieval populace. You don't just stand out because of your skill. You stand out because the bow has literally stretched your potential. As the wind picks up across the butts, you feel the yew stave cool in your hand. It's a strange, intimate feeling. The wood is an adversary when you pull it, but a protector when you hold it. You reach for your quiver, the movement as natural as breathing. You and the wood are made of the same stuff now. Fibers and minerals, tension and grit. You set your feet, lock your thickened wrist, and prepare to bring the yew to life once more, your bones singing in harmony with the grain of the wood. To understand the sheer magnitude of what your skeleton is fighting against, we have to talk about the number: 150 pounds. In the modern world of archery, a heavy hunting bow might pull 60 or 70 pounds, and even then, most people struggle to hold it steady for more than a few seconds. You, however, are dealing with more than double that weight. Imagine you are standing in your backyard, and someone hands you two massive 75-pound suitcases. Now, instead of carrying them by your sides, imagine trying to hold that entire weight suspended from 3 fingers of one hand, while your other arm pushes against a solid brick wall. This isn't just a workout, it is a structural crisis for the human body. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer mechanical crush of this weight without your years of Sunday conditioning. Your joints would simply collapse into a pile of loose cartilage and regret. When you reach full draw, that 150 pounds of potential energy is trying to find a way to ground itself. It travels from the string into your fingers, down your forearm, through your elbow, and into your shoulder. From there, it crosses your chest and flows into your left arm, which is locked against the bow's grip. This creates a crushing loop through your upper torso. Historians still argue whether the average draw weight was truly 150 pounds, or if that was reserved for the absolute elite. But recent analysis of bows found on the Mary Rose suggests that the range was between 100 and 180 pounds. You are operating at the upper limit of what biological tissue can endure before it simply tears itself apart. A quirky, somewhat terrifying tidbit is that if a longbow of this weight dry fires, meaning the string is released without an arrow to absorb the energy of the bow, itself can explode into a cloud of lethal U-splinters. But even more dangerous is the effect on the archer. The sudden violent snap of that much energy returning into your bones without the dampening effect of the arrow's weight can actually cause immediate stress fractures in a normal person's ribs. You've seen it happen to green recruits who try to show off with a veteran SBO. They end up on the ground, clutching their chests, wondering why they can't breathe. Your bones, however, have been pre-stressed like architectural concrete, allowing you to absorb that shock and keep standing. The physics of this weight also dictates the speed of your skeleton. You don't have the luxury of a slow, contemplative aim. At 150 pounds, the lactic acid begins to flood your muscles the instant you hit full draw. You have maybe 2, perhaps 3 seconds of peak stability before your frame begins to tremble. This is why the English archer is known for a rapid, rhythmic style of shooting. You don't aim with your eyes as much as you aim with your bonamori. You feel the alignment of your spine and the lock of your shoulder, and you know the arrow will go where it needs to. You are a biological computer, calculating trajectories through the felt tension of 150 pounds of you. This weight is also why your anchor point is so critical. You don't draw to your chin like a modern target archer. You draw to your ear or your jawline. This allows you to use the solid bone of your skull as a secondary brace. By tucking your thumb behind your jaw, you are essentially locking the weight of the bow into your skeletal frame, bypassing some of the muscle fatigue. It's a clever bit of cheating that your body has evolved to survive. You aren't just strong, you are efficient. You have found every possible way to let your calcium-rich skeleton take the burden off your protein-based muscles. Think about the caloric cost of this to move 150 pounds of resistance 10 times a minute for the duration of a battle like Agincourt or Crécy. Your body is burning fuel like a modern furnace. You are likely eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day on campaign, mostly bread, salt, pork, and eland. Your body is turning every bit of it into bone density and muscle mass. You are a biological engine designed for height arc output. The 150 pounds draw is the benchmark of your professional existence. It's the entry fee for the Elite Archers Guild, and your skeleton has been paying that fee in installments since you were a child. As you stand at the butts, you feel the familiar, crushing weight of the string. Your breath is steady, held in that half-lung position we talked about to provide internal pressure. Your spine, with its specialized archery curve, settles into the load like a well-designed bridge. The 150 pounds doesn't feel like an enemy anymore. It feels like a heavy blanket, a known quantity. You release, and the energy screams away from you, leaving your bones humming with the aftershock. You aren't just a man pulling a bow. You are the only thing in the world capable of standing under that much pressure and remaining unbroken. As you stand in the mud of the practice field, the 150 pounds draw weight is only half of the physical equation. The other half is the sheath the bundle of 24 arrows that you are expected to loose with terrifying speed and precision. In a modern context, we think of archery as a slow, meditative sport. But for you, it is high-intensity interval training of the most brutal variety. In the heat of a storm of arrows, you are expected to maintain a rate of 10 to 12 shots per minute. If you do the math, that means every 5 to 6 seconds, you are engaging those 150 pounds, locking your skeleton, finding your mark, and releasing. Over the course of a single minute, your frame is moving nearly a ton of resistance. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer cardiovascular red line of this pace today. Your heart would be hammering against your reinforced ribs like a trapped bird. This relentless pace requires a specific kind of skeletal endurance. While we focused on the density of your bones, we also have to look at the joint lubrication. Your body has had to increase the production of synovial fluid in your shoulders and elbows to keep the joints from grinding into dust under the rapid-fire friction. Historians still argue whether archers at Agincourt really kept up this machine-gun pace for the duration of the battle, or if they shot in disciplined pulses to allow their skeletons a few seconds of recovery. But whether it was a constant stream or a series of bursts, the result was the same: a cumulative tonnage that would crush a normal man's spirit and his spine. A quirky fringe tidbit about arrow logistics is that you do want to keep your arrows in a back quiver, like a character in a fantasy movie. That's for hunters. For war, you stick your arrows directly into the ground in front of you. This isn't just for speed, it's a form of biowarfare. The dirt on the arrowheads, often containing traces of manure from the fields, meant that even a non-lethal scratch could lead to a fatal infection for your enemy. But for you, it means your pulling movement is a repetitive downward and upward cycle. You reach down, knock, draw, release. Reach down, knock, draw, release. This creates a rhythmic, rocking motion in your hips and lower back, further contributing to that archery tilt we've discussed. As you move through a sheath, your body enters a state of mechanical trance. Your muscles are screaming, but your bones have taken over the structural load. This is where the lifelong training becomes a survival mechanism. Because your tendons are so thick and your bony adamant so jagged and secure, you aren't using your strength, you are cycling it. You've learned to use the recoil of the previous shot to help spring your body into the next draw. It's a conservation of momentum that is only possible because your skeleton has the rigidity of a steel crane. If you were soft, the energy of the bow would dissipate into your flesh. Because you are deformed and hard, the energy remains in the system. The arrows themselves are clothyard shafts, roughly 30 inches of heavy ash or birch, tipped with a steel bodkin point designed for armor penetration. They are heavy. A sheaf of 24 arrows weighs several pounds, and on a long campaign, you might be carrying 3 or 4 sheaves. This constant dead weight, hanging from your belt or shoulder, further compresses your spine day after day, mile after mile. Your skeleton is never truly off duty. Even when you aren't shooting, the tools of your trade are working to reshape your frame, pushing your pelvis into a slight tilt and reinforcing your lower vertebrae to handle the lopsided weight. Think about the logistics of the breath during this rapid-fire sequence. You aren't taking full deep breaths. You are sipping air in the pauses between releases. This creates a state of mild hypoxia, low oxygen, which some historians believe contributed to the battle rage or the hyperfocused flow state that English archers were famous for. You are operating in a world of narrowed vision, the smell of wood wax, and the rhythmic thrumpthwack of the string. Your body has become a biological metronome, counting out the seconds in units of 150 pounds increments. By the time you reach the bottom of your sheath, your left arm is vibrating with residual shock. The bones feel like they are humming, a deep-seated bone bruise that takes minutes to subside. You reach down for the last arrow, your fingers finding the knock through a layer of mud and numbness. You lay into the bow one last time, your curved spine and thickened humerus locking into the familiar, agonizing geometry. You release, and as the last shaft vanishes into the target, you stand there, chests heaving, a man whose very skeleton has moved a mountain of wood and iron in the span of a few minutes. The rain has been falling for days, turning the French countryside into a primordial soup of gray clay and rotting vegetation. You are standing on a ridge near a small village called Agincourt, and your boots are sinking inches deep into the mire. This is the moment where your lifelong skeletal deformation transitions from a medical curiosity into a tactical superpower. The French knights across the field are encased in 60 pounds of steel plate, mounted on massive chargers, but the mud is their undoing. You, however, are a biological tripod. Your thickened leg bones and that archery tilt in your hips allow you to find purchase where others slip. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer sensory overload of this moment today. The smell of 10,000 wet horses and the metallic tang of sharpening stones is overwhelming. As the first command to knock echoes down the line, you feel your skeleton engage. This is the mainstream historical fact of the longbow. At Agincourt, it wasn't just the arrow's flight that won the day, but the archer's ability to remain physically functional in conditions that neutralized heavy cavalry. Because you have laid your body into the bow since childhood, your center of gravity is lower and more stable than a man who spends his life in a saddle. When you draw, the pressure doesn't push you backward into the mud. Your reinforced spine and wedged vertebrae act like a literal stake driven into the ground. You are anchored by your own bone density. A quirky, somewhat gruesome tidbit of this battle is that many archers, including you, have stripped off your heavy wool hosen or even your breeches, the bloody flux dysenteries ripping through the English camp. And you don't have time to faff about with clothing when the French start their charge. You are standing in the mud, half-naked from the waist down, a deformed and lopsided warrior loosing death at a rate of 10 shafts a minute. Historians still argue whether the stakes the archers drove into the ground were a response to the lack of infantry support or a pre-planned defensive masterpiece. But for you, those stakes are just an extension of your own rigid frame. As the French cavalry begins its lumbering gallop, you enter the storm of arrows. This is the peak of your skeletal utility. Each time you draw, you are fighting the vacuum of the mud pulling at your feet and the 150 pounds of the yew pulling at your shoulders. Your oso-chromial allows your drawing shoulder to slide back that extra inch, giving your arrows the velocity needed to punch through the weaker points of a knight's harness the visor slits. The armpits, the groin. You aren't just hitting targets, you are threading the needle with a force that would shatter a normal man's collarbone. The quirky tidbit of the day is the sound 10,000 arrows in the air at once don't whistle. They hiss like a giant nest of vipers. This is the whiffling sound of the fletchings. Your ears, tuned to the thrum of your own bow, can actually hear the collective tension of the English line. You feel a strange sense of lopsided harmony. Every man around you has the same curved spine, the same thickened left arm, the same gnarled fingers. You are a forest of yew and bone, swaying in time with the commands of the masters. As the knights reach the English line, the mud has exhausted them. Their horses are stumbling, and the sheer weight of their armor is a death sentence in the deep clay. You drop your bow and reach for your mala heavy lead hammer or a simple wood-chopping axe. Here, your archery shoulders find a new purpose, the same muscles and bony attaments that allow you to draw 150 pounds of yew, allow you to swing a 5-pound hammer with a force that can dent helmets and crush breastplates. You are a specialist in heavy torque movements, the warping of your humerus and the spiral torsion of your arm. Bones make you a terrifyingly efficient close-quarters combatant. Historians often focus on the tactical error of the French, but they rarely mention the biological superiority of the English archer in these specific conditions. You are an athlete who has been in spring training for 20 years. Your skeleton is a masterpiece of specialized hardening. By the time the sun begins to set over the blood-soaked field, the deformation of your body is what has kept you standing, while the perfect specimens of French nobility are being hauled out of the mud as prisoners or corpses. You stand there, your breath coming in ragged gasps, your left arm vibrating with that familiar bonne deep hum. Your curved spine aches, but it held. Your fingers are numb, but they didn't fail. You look down at your hands, stained with mud and yew oil, and you realize that you are the architect of this victory. You weren't born for this, you were grown for it. You reach for a discarded water skin, your movements stiff and asymmetrical, and you prepare for the long, cold night ahead, a living testament to the power of a warped frame. You've survived the mud and the blood of the battlefield. But as the adrenaline fades, a different kind of reality sets in, the biological maintenance of your specialized frame. To keep those bones dense and those cables of muscle functional, you require a caloric intake that would baffle a modern office worker. You aren't eating the delicate spiced meats of the nobility. You are fueled by a peasant diet that is high in protein, complex carbohydrates, and minerals. You consume staggering amounts of pottage, a thick stew of peas, beans, and whatever seasonal vegetables you can find, along with dense, dark rye bread. This isn't just fuel, it's the raw material for your skeletal remodeling. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer digestive monotony of this diet today. But your 14th century gut handles it with the same rugged efficiency as your bowworm. The mainstream historical fact here is that the English archer was often better fed than the average continental foot soldier. The crown knew that a starving archer was a useless archer if you lack the calcium and vitamin D provided by dairy and sunlight. Your bones won't thicken, they'll soften, leading to rickets or fractures under the 150 pounds draw. You eat a surprising amount of cheese and drink gallons of small ale, which provides a steady, if low-grade, source of calories and hydration. Your body is essentially a furnace that never goes out. It is constantly burning through these nutrients to repair the microfractures in your humerus and to keep your iron fingers from cramping. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit about your diet involves the calcium kick. There are accounts of soldiers grinding up eggshells or even the bones of small fish to mix into their pottage when supplies ran low. While they didn't have a concept of calcium supplements, they understood through ancestral trial and error that bone makes bone. You might find yourself chewing on a knuckle bone long after the meat is gone, subconsciously seeking the minerals your skeleton is screaming for. Historians still argue whether the English archer height advantage, often several inches over their French counterparts, was purely genetic or a direct result of this high-protein-mandated diet. This diet also supports the massive upper body musculature that acts as the biological armor for your skeleton. Your latissimus, dorsi, and trapezius muscles are so thick they feel like slabs of cured ham under your tunic. These muscles don't just pull the string, they act as a tension wrap for your spine. Without this muscular support, your archery curve would likely collapse into a debilitating hump. You are in a constant state of hypertrophy, where your muscles are growing to meet the demands of the bone, and your bone is thickening to meet the pull of the muscle. It's a feedback loop that requires constant fueling. You also have to consider the role of salt. On a hot campaign day, you lose massive amounts of sodium through your sweat. If you don't replace it, your muscles will seize up at the halfway point of the draw. Terrifying prospect when a knight is charging at you. You carry a small leather pouch of salt, sometimes mixed with dried herbs, to lick during the heat of the day. It's a primitive electrolyte replacement that keeps your nervous system firing. You've learned that the taste of salt is the taste of a functioning shoulder. Think about the ale factor. In an era where water could be a gamble for your bowels, the fermented ale is your primary source of hydration. It's thick, cloudy, and full of B vitamins. You aren't getting drunk, you're staying alive. The mild sedative effect of the alcohol might even help with the chronic bone throb that sets in after a day at the butts. It's the medieval version of a post-workout recovery drink, though it smells more like a barn than a berry blast smoothie. As you sit by the campfire, tearing into a loaf of rye bread, you feel the weight of your own body. You feel heavy in a way that is satisfying. Your muscles are full of glycogen, and your bones are saturated with the minerals from 1,000 bowls of pottage. You aren't just a soldier, you are a carefully maintained biological asset. You reach for your horn of ale, your hands steady despite the day's labor, and you realize that every bite you take is another layer of calcium for the fortress that is your frame. The king provides the grain, but you provide the grit to turn it into a weapon. As the fire dies down and the damp cold of the French night begins to seep through your wool cloak, you encounter the grim reality that your skeletal superpowers come with a heavy tax. You are likely in your mid-20s, yet your body is already starting to send you the bills for a decade of 150-pound draws. This is the mainstream historical fact of the veteran archer early onset, chronic osteoarthritis. While your bones are dense and your muscles are powerful, the cartilage, that smooth, protective cushion between your joints, has been systematically ground down. Every time you lay into the bow, the friction in your right shoulder and left wrist is equivalent to a car engine running without enough oil. You probably wouldn't survive the mental toll of this constant throbbing inflammation today, but in your world, pain is just the background noise of your profession. Historians and bioarchaeologists, looking at the Mary Rose remains, didn't just find thick bones. They found abernation. This is a condition where the cartilage has completely worn away, leaving bone to rub directly against bone. The result is a polished, ivory-like surface on the joint that looks beautiful to a scientist, but represents a world of agony for the man who owned it. Your right shoulder, the one that handles the ossicromial and the rotational torque, is likely a landscape of bone spurs and pitted surfaces. When you wake up in the morning, your first few movements are accompanied by a series of audible clicks and pops that sound like dry kindling snapping. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit is that medieval archers may have used bee venom therapy, or urtication deliberately, stinging themselves with nettles to manage this joint pain. By triggering a localized inflammatory response, they could temporarily mask the deeper structural ache of the arthritis, a primitive form of counter-rotation that gave them just enough mobility to string their bows for the day's practice. Historians still argue whether the English archers were retired early due to this disability, or if the social structure of the archery company allowed older, stiff veterans to serve as instructors and mentors, keeping their specialized knowledge alive even after their skeletons had reached their breaking point. The pain is most acute in your iron fingers. The joints of your drawing hand are permanently swollen, a condition you might mistake for simple callousing, but it's actually the bone itself expanding to cope with the inflammation. You've noticed that you can no longer make a tight fist. Your fingers stay in a permanent, slight hook, as if they are perpetually waiting for the hamstring to settle into the grooves. This claw hand isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a body that has literally set in the shape of its labor. You are a biological tool that can no longer be put back into its box. Then there's the vibration heady. After a long session at the butts, the repeated shock of the bow's release traveling through your skeleton can leave you with a dull, rhythmic throbbing at the base of your skull. Your neck vertebrae, which we mentioned, have developed those unique pittings, are under constant strain from the archery kiss and the stabilization of your head during the draw. You learned to sleep with a rolled-up tunic under your neck to keep the pressure off your spine. You are 25 years old, but you move with the calculated, slow grace of a man of 60, conserving every bit of joint fluid for the moments that truly matter. Think about the psychological resilience required to live in this state. You know that every arrow you loose is another mile on a chassis that is already wearing out. Yet, you continue. The social and legal pressure of the Sunday statutes is one thing, but there is also a grim pride in it. You are one of the few who can still bend the big wood. The pain is a badge of office. When you walk through the village, the younger boys look at your archer's gait and your gnarled hands with awe, not realizing that you would trade a good portion of your glory for a single morning without a stiff back. As you reach out to stir the embers of the fire, your wrist gives a sharp, biting twinge. You ignore it, wrapping your fingers around a piece of charcoal to move it back into the center. The heat feels good on your joints. You realize that your skeleton is no longer just a frame. It's a record of every Sunday you didn't play football, every sheaf you loosed in the rain, and every battle you survived. You are a living history book written in calcium and chronic inflammation. You close your eyes, the bone throb finally settling into a manageable hum, and you prepare for another day of turning your pain into the king's power. As you navigate the daily reality of your specialized frame, you begin to realize that you aren't an isolated phenomenon. You are half of a partnership. To your left, in the workshops of the camp or the village, is the bowyer, the man whose job it is to ensure the wood can withstand the power of your bones. This is the mainstream historical fact of the medieval arms race. The bowyer and the archer grew together. As your skeleton became denser and your draw weights climbed from 100 to 150 pounds, the bowyers had to refine their craft, selecting staves with tighter grain and perfecting the evenness of the bow's curve. They aren't just making weapons, they are tailoring them to the specific, deformed requirements of your body. You probably wouldn't survive the meticulous, soul-crushing patience required to scrape a stave for 10 hours just to lose a single pound of draw weight, but you certainly reap the benefits. The bowyer watches you at the butts. He isn't looking at your aim, he's looking at your stack. He sees the way your left arm locks and how your right shoulder rotates. If he notices you are overcompressing the wood because of your immense skeletal strength, he might leave the belly of the bow slightly flatter to resist the crush. A quirky, somewhat fringed tidbit is that veteran archers often had signature bows. A bowyer would know a man's skeletal quirks the length of his reach. The tilt of his spine end would carve the grip to fit the specific, gnarled calluses of that man's hand. It was a level of bespoke weaponry that modern soldiers, with their mass-produced rifles, would find hard to imagine. Historians still argue whether the transition from ash to yew was a sudden tactical shift or a slow generational adaptation, as archers' bodies became capable of handling more aggressive wood. What is certain is that the Fletchers, the arrow makers, were also adjusting to yew. As your iron fingers grew stronger, the Fletchers had to use stronger glues and heavier silk bindings for the feathers. If the fletching isn't perfect, the massive energy of your release will cause the arrow to fishtail or even shatter midair. You are a biological engine that is constantly threatening to outpace its own hardware. This synergy extends to the very string you use. A 150 pounds bow requires a string of high-quality hemp or linen, thickened with beeswax and glue size. If the string is too thin, it will snap your thickened finger bones. If it's too thick, it slows the shot. You've learned to listen to your string. Because your ear is so close to it during the archery kiss, you can hear the tiny snaps of individual fibers failing before the string actually breaks. It's a sensory input that your brain has integrated into your shooting rhythm. You and the craftsman are in a constant dialogue of wood, fiber, and calcium. Interestingly, the bowyer often used a tillatria, wooden frame with notchast, to test the bow's weight. But a veteran archer's skeleton is a much more accurate scale. You can tell within 5 pounds if a bow is true. Your body has been calibrated by a lifetime of standard weights. When you pick up a new stave, your archery spinal curve immediately adjusts to the anticipated load. It's a pre-programmed response. You are the test pilot for the bowyer's innovations. If he builds a bow that is too heavy, your bonemori will tell you instantly. If it's too light, it feels like a toy in your massive thickened grip. Think about the economics of this. A good yew longbow could cost as much as a peasant's house. You treat yours with more care than your own skin. You've seen men weep over a broken stave, not just because of the cost, but because that specific piece of wood had learned their body. It had taken on the set of their pull and the heat of their palm. When a bow breaks, the partnership ends, and your skeleton has to relearn the personality of a new piece of you. It's a period of physical adjustment that can take weeks of painful Sunday practice. As you watch the bowyer at his bench, his shavings of white and orange wood curling at his feet, you feel a deep, silent respect. He provides the spring, but you provide the soul. You reach for your current bow, the one that has seen you through 3 campaigns and 1,000 Sundays. The grip is dark and polished from the oils of your hand, a perfect negative image of your iron fingers. You lay into it, and for a moment, the wood, the string, and the bone are indistinguishable. The synergy is complete. You are the hammer, he is the forge, and together, you are the reason the French stay behind their walls. The training ground is silent today, save for the whistling of a bitter north wind, but inside your head, the noise is deafening. We often talk about the skeletal and muscular toll, but we rarely touch on the psychological discipline required to manage the biological strain of the draw. When you reach that 150 pounds peak, your body is screaming at you to let go. Every nerve ending in your back and shoulders is firing a danger signal, warning you that you are approaching the structural limits of your own frame. This is where the mental fortitude of the English archer resides. The ability to remain perfectly still while your bones are under enough pressure to crush a human skull. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer performance anxiety of this moment today. The pressure of a 150 pounds bow is like trying to solve a math problem while holding a car over your head. This mental focus is a form of proprioceptive mindfulness. You have to consciously override your body's natural survival instincts. Your brain wants to drop the weight to protect your rotator cuffs, but you force your os acromial to lock and your iron fingers to hold. Historians still argue whether the legendary steadiness of the English archer was a result of some unique cultural stoicism, or if it was simply a physiological byproduct of having bones so dense they no longer vibrated with the same frequency as a normal person. For you, it's a state of dynamic stillness. You are a statue made of high-tension wires. A quirky fringe tidbit about this mental game is the practice of blank bale shooting. To train the mind to ignore the physical pain of the draw, veteran archers would sometimes stand just a few feet from a target, close their eyes, and simply feel the draw. They weren't aiming with their eyes, they were aiming with the tension in their curved spines. They were learning to map the topography of their own skeletal deformation. By removing the visual element, you become intimately aware of the exact moment your humerus locks into its spiral torsion. You learn that the shot happens in the mind long before the fingers release the string. This psychological toll also involves the waiting. On a battlefield, you aren't always loosing arrows in a frantic storm. Sometimes you are ordered to hold. Imagine standing in the mud, your target in sight, holding 150 pounds of you at full draw for 5, 10, 15 seconds. The lactic acid builds, your vision begins to tunnel, and your reinforced ribs feel like they are being squeezed by a giant's hand. This is the ultimate test of your skeletal remodeling. If your bones weren't arched and thickened, they would begin to tremble, ruining your aim. But because you are a biological tripod, you can hold that tension with a grim, vibrating stability that unnerves the enemy. The quirky tidbit of the archery line is the silence. Despite the chaos of war, the archers often worked in a strange, focused quiet, punctuated only by the rhythmic breathing and the click of the arrows. This focus is what allowed you to ignore the fact that your spine is permanently crooked and your joints are on fire. You've entered a flow state where the pain is no longer an external sensation, but a part of the calibration. You know exactly how much throb in your shoulder equates to a 1,200-yard flight. You are using your own chronic inflammation as a rangefinder. Think about the post-shot mental crash. When you finally release and the energy leaves your body, there is a sudden, violent drop in internal pressure. It can leave you dizzy or even nauseous. Your heart, which has been pounding against your compressed chest, suddenly has room to beat again. You have to learn to ride this wave of physical relief without losing your place in the line. It's a rhythmic cycle of extreme stress followed by a vacuum of release. Over the course of a battle, this cycle repeats hundreds of times, wearing down your mental reserves as much as your physical ones. As you stand at the butts, you feel the wind tugging at your tunic, but you don't move. You are at full draw. The 150 pounds of you is trying to fold you in half, but your deformed skeleton says no. You are the master of the tension. You find that quiet place in your mind where the pain is just a data point. You release, the arrow strikes the center of the clout, and for a fleeting second, the mental exhaustion is replaced by a cold, sharp satisfaction. You are more than a man. You are a disciplined system of wood and bone, and as long as your mind holds, the bow will obey. To truly grasp the magnitude of your transformation, we have to pull you out of the medieval mud for a moment and place you in a sterile modern sports science lab. If we were to run a CT scan on you alongside a modern professional athlete, say, a Major League Baseball pitcher, or an elite tennis player, the results would be startling. This is the mainstream historical fact of our deep dive. Modern high-performance athletes actually exhibit skeletal remodeling very similar to yours, though rarely to the same extreme. A professional pitcher's throwing arm often shows humeral retrotorsion, where the bone has twisted along its axis to allow for a more violent whip-like motion. Your bones have done the same thing, but while the pitcher does it to throw a 5-inch ball, you did it to resist 150 pounds of Italian. You probably wouldn't survive the grueling training camp of a modern pro. But then again, they probably wouldn't survive a single Sunday at your village butts. The similarity is found in Wolff's Lotha principle that bone grows and strengthens in response to the loads placed upon it. In a modern tennis pro, the cortical bone of their dominant forearm is significantly thicker than their non-dominant one. But in you, the medieval archer, this asymmetrical hypertrophy is off the charts. While a tennis player might have a 10% to 15% difference in bone density between arms, your Mary Rose counterparts show differences of nearly 30%. You are essentially a super athlete whose sport was survival. The difference is that a modern athlete has a team of surgeons and therapists to manage the deformation. You just had a horn of ale and a royal decree. A quirky fringe tidbit that sports historians love to debate is whether the English draw actually gave you a mechanical advantage that modern biomechanics is only now beginning to understand. Some researchers suggest that the archery spinal curve acted like a pretensioned composite bow in its own right. By curving your spine, you weren't just leaning, you were storing elastic energy in your own ligaments. This means that when you released the arrow, your body sprung back into a neutral position, adding a tiny, almost imperceptible boost to the arrow's initial velocity. You were a biological, spring-loaded launcher. Historians still argue whether the deformities seen in medieval skeletons should be classified as injuries or as functional adaptations. In the modern world, if a child's spine started curving laterally and their shoulder bone failed to fuse, we'd call for a specialist and probably a brace. In your world, those are the markers of a high-value asset. You are the medieval equivalent of a Formula One, where every part of your chassis has been tweaked, lightened, or reinforced for one specific, high-speed task. If you try to drive that car to the grocery store, it struggles. If you try to live a normal life with an archer's skeleton, you feel out of place. The modern athlete comparison also highlights the age of onset. Most modern pros don't start their specialized loading until their teens, after much of their skeletal foundation is set. You started at 7. This is why your torsion is so much more profound. Your bones didn't just thicken. They changed their fundamental geometry while they were still plastic. You have a degree of skeletal integration with your weapon that no modern athlete can match. You don't hold the bow, you inhabit it. Think about the career longevity. A modern pitcher might last 15 years before their elbow gives out. You were expected to be battlefield fictive from age 18 until your late 30s or even 40s. Your deformed skeleton had to be durable enough to survive decades of use without the benefit of arthroscopic surgery. This is why the thickening of your bone was so aggressive. Your body wasn't just building for performance, it was building for warranty. It knew that if a bone snapped in the middle of a French field, there was no injured reserve list, there was only the mud. As you stand back at the butts, looking at the younger boys starting their journey, you see them with modern eyes for a second. You see the soft, straight spines and the symmetrical shoulders of the uninitiated. You know that in 10 years, they will look like you lopsided, gnarled, and incredibly powerful. You feel a strange sense of kinship with those future athletes of the longbow. You reach for your stave, the wood feeling familiar and right against your thickened palm. You are a biological masterpiece, a bridge between the raw potential of human DNA and the cold requirements of medieval ballistics. You pull your warped frame locking into place with the precision of a Swiss watch, and you let the arrow fly. As you stand at the butts, the thwack of the string isn't just a sound, it is a physical blow delivered directly to your joints. Specifically, we need to talk about the bowman's elbow. In the modern world, we have tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, which are usually just cases of tendinitis. But your condition, the medieval version, is something much more structural. Every time you release an arrow, the limb of the bow reaches the end of its travel and comes to a violent, shuddering halt. That vibration has to go somewhere, and the exit ramp for all that excess energy is your elbow. This is the mainstream historical fact of the veteran S-arm, the development of massive bone spurs, or osteophytes, at the olecranon on the point of your elbow. You probably wouldn't survive the constant grinding friction of these spurs today without a surgeon's chisel, but for you, it's just the price of a clean release. The physics here is brutal. When the string is loosed, the bow arm, the left one, is under total compression, holding back that 150-pound spring. When the arrow leaves the shelf, the bow jumps forward. But because your arm is locked straight to maintain aim, the elbow joint takes the brunt of the recoil. Over thousands of repetitions, the tendons that anchor your forearm muscles to the bone begin to pull so violently that they cause traction injuries. Your body, in its infinite and somewhat clumsy wisdom, tries to heal these injuries by turning the damaged tendon into bone. The result is a jagged, hooked growth at the elbow that makes it impossible for you to fully straighten your arm. You have a permanent archer's crook in your limb. A quirky fringe tidbit involves the clatter of the veteran. It was said that you could tell the experienced level of an archer not by his aim, but by the sound his joints made when he stretched. The calcification of the tendons and the presence of joint myosteny fragments of bone or cartilage that have broken off and are floating inside the joint capsule meant that a veteran archer moved with a rhythmic clicking sound. Historians still argue whether this elbow lock was actually a tactical advantage, providing a natural stop that prevented the arm from overextending during the high-stress moments of a battle, or if it was simply a crippling disability that the archers worked around. This elbow damage also affects your grip. The nerves that control your iron fingers pass right through the narrow channels of the elbow. As the bone thickens and the spurs grow, those nerves can become pinched, leading to the pins and needles sensation we mentioned earlier, or even a loss of motor control. You've learned a specific way to flick your wrist during the release to minimize the shock. A technique passed down from father to son that is as much about joint preservation as it is about accuracy. You are practicing medieval ergonomics, trying to find the one path of least resistance for a weapon that is designed to resist you. Think about the vibration dampening you've tried to implement. You might wrap your left wrist and elbow in tight leather bindings, not just to protect against the string slap, but to act as a compression sleeve for your aching joints. You've noticed that on damp, rainy mornings in France, the elbow is the first thing to wake up, screaming with a dull, heavy ache that feels like lead. You have to warm up your skeleton, moving the arm in slow, deliberate circles until the synovial fluid thins out and the joint mice find a corner of the capsule where they woe uncause a sharp stabbing pain. There is also the matter of bursitis. The small, fluid-filled sacs that cushion your joints have likely become permanently inflamed and thickened. Your elbow might look bulbous or swollen even when you aren't injured. In the village, this is seen as a mark of a hard man. To you, it's just a hot, tender lump that makes it uncomfortable to rest your arm on a wooden table. You are a biological sacrifice. You are trading the fluidity of your youth for the rigid, bone-deep power of the longbow. As you knock your next arrow, you feel that familiar catch in your elbow. You breathe through it, locking the joint into its reinforced groove. The bow is raised, the 150 pounds of pressure settles in, and your bowman's elbow acts as the solid, unyielding hinge it was forced to become. You release, the energy crashes through your arm, and you ignore the jagged click of the bone spurs. The arrow hits the mark. You are a machine that is slowly grinding itself to pieces. But for now, the gears still turn, and the king's enemies are still within range. As you stand on the ridge, the target isn't a wooden board. It's a line of men 200 yards away. This is where the skeletal transformation proves its worth in lethality. To reach that range with enough force to penetrate a thick gambeson or the weak points of plate armor, you need more than just a heavy bow. You need the physical stability to launch a heavy war-grade arrow with perfect consistency. This is the mainstream historical fact of the longbow. Its legendary range and power were entirely dependent on the archer's ability to maximize the potential energy of the UH. If you were a normal man with a normal skeleton, your arms would shake so violently at full draw that your accuracy would be non-existent. But because you are a biological tripod, your shots fly with the flat, terrifying trajectory of a modern rifle. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer concussive force of being on the receiving end of a volley like this. It isn't a rain of arrows, it's a falling wall of iron. The science of this lethality is found in the dwell time at full draw, because your ossa acromial and thickened vertebrae allow you to hold the weight steady for those few critical seconds. You can refine your aim just enough to account for the wind and the loft of the heavy ash-shaft. A common fringe or a quirky tidbit is that English archers often practiced clout shooting, where they aimed at a tiny white rag on a stick at distances of over 240 yards. This wasn't just for sport, it was to train the body to handle the arc of death. Historians still argue whether a longbow arrow could truly pierce high-quality tempered steel at that range, or if the lethality came from the sheer volume of arrows finding the gaps in the armor. Regardless, your bones provide the platform that makes that volume possible. Your skeletal deformation also contributes to your muzzle velocity, because your humerus has that torsion or twist, and your muscle attachments are so jagged and robust, your release is faster and cleaner than a soft hand absorbs energy. Your iron fingers and calloused grip release the string with a mechanical sharpness that transfers nearly 85% of the bow's energy directly into the arrow. This is why your shots hum with a different frequency. When you loose a shaft, it isn't just flying. It is being driven by a decade of biological hardening. There is a psychological lethality here too. The enemy knows that the men in the bentback companies are specialists. They see your lopsided shoulders, and they know that you can hit a man's faceplate at a distance where they can barely see your eyes. This reputation of bone is a weapon in itself. You have sacrificed the symmetry of your body to become a symbol of unavoidable reach. Every time you lay into the bow, you are reminding the world that the King of England has 1,000 human machines whose only purpose is to extend his will across a field of mud and iron. Think about the impact shock. When your arrow hits, it carries the force of a modern handgun round. To generate that kind of power, your body has to withstand an equal and opposite reaction every time you practice. Your archery spinal curve acts as a shock absorber for the energy that doesn't leave the bow. You are essentially a recoil-compensated weapon system. Without your deformations, the sheer repetitive impact of shooting war weight would eventually cause internal hemorrhaging or detached retinas. Your body has built the padding out of extra bone and thickened connective tissue. As you nock an arrow for the long-distance volley, you look at the tiny figures of the enemy. You don't see men, you see points of impact. You feel the wind on your cheek, adjust the tilt of your warped spine by a fraction of an inch, and draw the 150 pounds of you groans. But your skeleton is silent and steady. You release, and the arrow disappears into the gray sky. You don't need to see it hit. You felt the truth of the shot in your marrow. You are the master of the long-range kill, and your body is the silent architect of that mastery. As you walk through a bustling market town during a rare break from the king's service, you notice something curious. People step aside for you. It is you and T just because of the sword at your hip or the king's badge on your tunic. It's because of your stature. In the medieval world, where the average peasant might stand a few inches shorter due to inconsistent childhood nutrition, you and your fellow archers are often the tallest and broadest men in the room. This is the mainstream historical fact of the archer's social identity. You are an unmistakable icon. Between the mandated high-protein diet we discussed and the physical stretching of your frame during those crucial growth years, you have become a biological elite. You probably wouldn't survive the tall poppy syndrome of a modern workplace. But in the 14th century, being a big man is your social capital. Your stature is a combination of genetics and deliberate cultivation. The crown sought out tall, long-limbed boys for the archery butts because a longer reach meant a longer draw, and a longer draw meant more work performed on the arrow. But beyond your height, It is the breadth of your shoulders that truly marks you, because your back muscles have grown so thick that they pushed your shoulder blades outward, and because your collarbones have thickened and arched, you have a V taper that looks almost modern in its proportions. However, it's an asymmetrical V. Your left shoulder is visibly broader and more fixed than your right, giving you a powerful, slightly hunched look that signals archer to anyone with eyes. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit is that this physical look led to a specific fashion among the English peasantry. Men who weren't even archers would sometimes pad the shoulders of their tunics to mimic the broad, powerful frame of the archery corps. It was the medieval version of wearing an athletic jersey to look more formidable. Historians still argue whether this archer's prestige made you a favorite for local marriages, or if your deformed and lopsided frame made you seem like a specialized tool of the state respected, but perhaps a bit frightening to those who didn't live by the bow. This status also meant you were legally and socially distinct. You were yeoman in the backbone of the English middle class. You weren't a serf tied to the land, but you weren't a knight of noble blood either. You occupied a unique biological and social middle ground. Your skeletal deformation was the proof of your status. When a tax collector or a local lord looked at you, they saw the archery spinal curve and the iron fingers, and they knew you were a man of the king's own weapon system. You were afforded certain privileges, like the right to hunt small game or a higher wage on campaign, because the crown knew your body was a precious, non-renewable resource. But there is a loneliness to this stature. You can't hide who you are. If you were to desert the army and try to start a new life in a distant city, your bones would betray you. A master at arms would only need to see you lift a heavy crate or watch the way you stand to know you were a trained longbowman. Your deformation is a permanent uniform. You are branded by your own calcium. This is why archers often formed tight-knit guilds or brotherhoods. Only another man with a crooked spine and a bowman's elbow truly understood the daily cost of that social prestige. Think about the aura you project. When you enter a tavern, the clink of your joint mice and the steady, heavy thud of your dense leg bones create a presence. You are a man built for high-dark violence, and your skeleton radiates that potential even when you are just reaching for a loaf of bread. You have traded the normal human experience of physical symmetry for a life of specialized, lopsided power. You are a giant of the youth. As you sit on a bench watching the townspeople go about their lives, you feel the familiar ache in your archery shoulder. You see a young boy staring at you, his eyes wide as he takes in your broad frame and your gnarled iron hand. You give him a small, grim nod. You know what his future holds if he follows the Sunday statutes. He sees the glory and the height. You feel the bone throb and the tilt. You reach for your waterskin, the movement deliberate and slightly stiff, a living monument to the price of being the king's tall man. The air in the training yard feels different today. There is a new sound competing with the thrum of the sharp, violent crack, followed by a cloud of acrid, sulfurous smoke. You are witnessing the beginning of the end. Gunpowder has arrived in the form of the arquebus, and while these early firearms are heavy, prone to exploding in the user's face, and wildly inaccurate, they represent a seismic shift in the biological cost of warfare. This is the mainstream historical fact of the 15th and 16th centuries. The longbow don't disappear because it was outperformed. It disappeared because the human cost of growing an archer became too high. You probably wouldn't survive the frustration of being replaced by a machine. But for the next generation of English boys, the decline of the bow is a skeletal mercy. The crown is starting to realize a harsh mathematical truth. It takes 20 years of Sunday statutes, skeletal remodeling, and high-protein pottage to produce one elite longbowman who can loose 10 shafts a minute. It takes about 2 weeks to teach a peasant how to point a handgun and pull a trigger. The firearm doesn't care if you have humeral torsion or an archery spinal curve. It doesn't require you to start training at age 7, and it doesn't demand that you grind your cartilage into ivory, hibernation. The machine provides the power that your bones used to have to generate. For the first time in centuries, the English military machine is looking for a way to bypass the human skeleton. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit is that there was a longbow lobby in the English Parliament that fought against the adoption of firearms for decades. They argued that the physical character of the English man would wither away if he was unforced to the butts every Sunday. They even tried to pass laws requiring every man to own a bow, even if he also owned a gun. Historians still argue whether this was out of genuine military concern or a nostalgic attachment to the warped physique that had defined English identity for so long. To them, a man with a straight spine and soft hands wasn't just a soldier, he was a sign of national decline. As you watch a recruit fumble with a matchlock, you feel a strange mix of contempt and envy. He won't have the bowman's elbow. He woe unspend his 30s waking. Up to the sound of his own joints clicking like dry sticks, his shoulders will remain symmetrical, and his fingers will stay nimble enough to play a lute or write a letter. But he also won't have your bonamori. He doesn't know the intimate, terrifying vibration of 150 pounds of tension held inches from his eye. He is a plug-and-play soldier, replaceable and unremarkable. You, with your deformed and specialized frame, are a handcrafted masterpiece of biological engineering that is suddenly becoming obsolete. The decline is slow, but visible. The village butts are falling into disrepair. The statutes of 7 are being ignored more often, and the fines for playing football instead of archery are rarely collected. You see fewer and fewer boys with the archer's gait. The biological investment that the kingdom made in its subjects, bones, is being diverted into iron casting and saltpeter production. You are the last of a breed. Your warped spine and thickened humerus are no longer the cutting edge of technology. They are relics of a passing era. Think about the relief this transition brings to the common family. A father no longer has to watch his son's body slowly distort under the weight of the The Sunday burn is being replaced by the smell of sulfur. While the battlefield becomes louder and more chaotic, the internal bonic of the English population is finally starting to recede. You stand there, your gnarled hand resting on your old yew-stave, and you realize that your skeleton is a museum of a way of life that is being buried by the future. As the sun sets over the range, you take one last look at the targets. You won't be replaced today, or even tomorrow, but the change is coming. You reach for your bow, the movement stiff but practiced. You lay into the wood one more time, feeling the familiar, crushing pressure that has shaped your entire life. You release, and as the arrow strikes the center, you realize that, while the gun may be the future, it will never know the silent, bonnet-deep harmony of the man in the wood. You are a living end cap to 1,000 years of skeletal history, even as the longbow begins its long retreat from the front lines of history. Your specialized life has left a mark that is unjust etched in etched in the very air you breathe. You see, the culture of the deformed archer was so pervasive that it fundamentally reshaped the English language. This is the mainstream historical fact of this section. Dozens of common phrases you use today were born at the archery butts, coined by men with lopsided shoulders and iron fingers. When you speak of a point-blank range, you are referencing the white point, the point blank, at the center of the target. When you talk about the upshot of a situation, you're using a term for the final deciding arrow of a competition. You probably wouldn't survive the linguistic confusion of a world without these metaphors, as they provide the aim for how you describe the world. Your body is a walking dictionary of these terms. When someone is high-strung, you think of the tension in your 150 pounds bow. If someone is straight as an arrow, you look at your own curved spine and find the irony deeply amusing. A quirky, somewhat fringe tidbit is that the very word taxing, meaning a task that is physically or mentally draining, may have roots in the taxine alkaloids of the yew wood and the literal tax, the bow placed on the archer's skeleton. While etymologists still debate the exact origins of every phrase, the connection between the Sunday burn and the way you express struggle is undeniable. Historians still argue whether the two-fingered salute, the V sign, truly originated as a taunt from English archers to the French, showing that they still had their string fingers. But the legend itself speaks to how central your hands were to the national psyche. This linguistic legacy acts as a ghost of your skeletal deformation. Long after the last yew-stave has rotted and the merry rose has been buried in silt, people will still use the logic of the bow to navigate their lives. When you fasten your eyes on a target, you are performing the mental lock we discussed in section 17. When you are at the end of your tether, you are feeling the limit of the string's stretch. Your warped existence has provided the metaphors for precision, tension, and consequence. You aren't just a soldier, you are a cultural architect. Think about the inner circle. In the archery companies, you had a slang that only men with bowman's elbow could truly understand. You spoke of backing a bow, feathering a nest, and keeping it under your ear. This jargon was a linguistic armor that mirrored your biological armor. It kept the undeformed world at a distance. When you go to the tavern, you don't need to explain why you can't straighten your arm. You just say you've been working the wood, and every man in the room understands the specific, grinding ache that phrase implies. Even the way you measure space is dictated by your bow. A bow shot is a standard unit of distance. In your mind, roughly 200 to 240 yards, you don't see a field in acres. You see it in volleys. You don't see a road in miles. You see it in the stretching of the spine. Your specialized anatomy has given you a specialized way of perceiving the universe. The deformation has reached into your brain and remapped your vocabulary, turning every conversation into a reflection of the 150 pounds pull. As you sit in the village square, listening to the gossip of the townspeople, you hear the echoes of the buts in every third sentence. You hear a mother tell her son to keep his eye on the ball, a variation of the focus you've spent 20 years perfecting. You hear a merchant talk about hitting the mark with a new price. You realize that while your bones will eventually turn to dust, these words will keep the English warbow alive in the mouths of people who have never even touched a piece of you. You look at your iron fingers, now stiff and cold in the evening air. They may not be able to play a lute, but they've written the script for the next 500 years of the English tongue. You reach for your cloak, the movement accompanied by the familiar click of your elbow. It's a sound that doesn't need a word, but if it did, the word would be service. You walk toward your home, your archery tilt, casting a long, unmistakable shadow on the cobbles, a shadow that is, in its own way, a permanent part of the landscape. The mud of Agincourt has long since dried, and the Sunday burn has faded into the quiet hum of history, but the physical reality of the warbow is seeing a strange, modern revival. In the 21st century, a dedicated group of heavy bow archers and experimental archaeologists are attempting to recreate the feats of your ancestors. They pick up staves of Italian yew with draw weights of 140, 160, and even 200 pounds, trying to reclaim the lost power of the medieval longbow. This is the mainstream historical fact of our modern era. Without the lifelong skeletal deformation you underwent, these modern archers are at a massive physiological disadvantage. They are athletes, yes, but they are trying to run a Heiderk engine on a stock standard chassis. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer confusion of seeing a man in a lycra shirt trying to do your job. But you'd certainly recognize the look of Bontarua in his eyes when he hits full draw. Modern science has been watching these enthusiasts closely. When a modern human who grew up sitting at a desk rather than standing at the butts tries to pull a 150 pounds bow, the results can be catastrophic. Doctors have documented avulsion fractures, where the muscle suddenly and violently contracted, literally, tears a chunk of bone away at the attachment point because the bone has been cold forged by 20 years of Sunday practice. This is the quirky tidbit of modern reenactment. You cannot simply gym your way into being a medieval archer. You can have the biggest biceps in the world, but if your humerus has undeveloped that spiral torsion and your cortex has unthickened since age 7, the bow will eventually break the man. Historians still argue whether the Mary Rose level of deformation is even possible to achieve in adulthood. The consensus is leaning toward no. The plasticity of the juvenile skeleton is a window that slams shut once the growth plates fuse. Modern warbow archers often suffer from chronic slap tears in their shoulders and debilitating tendinitis because their bodies are fighting against their own architecture. They are trying to be the hammer, but their skeletons are still made of glass compared to your iron and calcium frame. They use modern sports medicine, ice packs, and ibuprofen to mimic a fraction of the durability you achieved through pottage and royal decree. There is an open scholarly debate phrase often heard in these circles. Historians still argue whether the warbow was a weapon of technique or a weapon of sheer biological mass. Modern reenactors have proven that you can hit the targets, but they cannot do it 10 times a minute for 4 hours without their joints screaming for mercy. They lack the synovial thickening and the ossified attachments that turned your pain into a background hum. They are visitors in a world of tension that you were a permanent resident of. They admire your stature, but they often forget the bone throb that came with it. This modern perspective actually highlights the unseen genius of the medieval system. By making archery a mandatory social activity, the English crown created a biological reserve. They weren't just training soldiers, they were farming a specific kind of human being. When you see a modern archer struggle to hold a 150 pounds draw for even a second, you realize just how much work your warped spine and bowman's elbow were doing for you. You weren't just strong, you were structurally correct for the weapon. You were the only human being in history who could look at a 150 pounds piece of wood and see an equal. As you look at these modern warriors, you might feel a flicker of gentle sarcasm. They have their specialized gloves, their carbon fiber arrows, and their physical therapists. Yet they still tremble under the weight of the UH. They are trying to reclaim a heritage that is written in your very marrow, but they are missing the Sunday foundation. You reach for your own bouth, real thing. Seasoned by the oils of your calloused hands, and you feel the familiar, comforting click of your OSA chromial. You don't need a therapist, you just need a target. You lay your body into the wood, and the transition is seamless. There is no trembling, no fear of a snapped bone, no modern hesitation. You and the bow are one single, deformed, and perfect machine. You release the arrow, and as it screams into the distance, you realize that while the modern world can study your bones, it can never truly replicate the grit of a life spent in the shadow of the UI. You are a biological anomaly that the future can only wonder at. The sun is finally dipping below the horizon, casting a long, distorted shadow of your frame across the churned earth of the butts. This is the end of the journey, where the tension of the string and the pressure on the bone finally find their resting place. We have looked at the thickening of your humerus, the spiral torsion of your arm bones, the lateral curve of your spine, and the failure of your shoulder to fuse. We have seen how the English crown didn't just recruit soldiers. It grew them in a specialized biological forge. This is the final mainstream historical fact of our deep dive. The English longbowman was the most physically specialized soldier of the pre-industrial world, a man whose very skeleton was sacrificed to become the primary weapon of his nation. You probably wouldn't survive the quiet realization of how much of you has been traded for the bow, but as you stand here in the twilight, you feel a profound sense of completeness. There is a quirky, almost poetic tidbit that archaeologists have noted when looking at the remains of longbowmen. Even after centuries in the soil, the posture of the archer remains. Because the bones have been so heavily remodeled, they don't just collapse into a pile of random calcium, they retain the set of the draw. It's as if the earth itself is holding a ghost of a 150-pound pull. Historians still argue whether this lifelong skeletal deformation should be viewed as a tragedy of child labor or a masterpiece of national endurance. For you, it is simply the only life you've ever known. Your bones are a silent record of every Sunday afternoon, every rainy campaign, and every storm of arrows that you survived. As you look at your iron fingers one last time, you see the ghost of the hempstring etched into your calluses. You see the broadness of your left shoulder and the archer's crook in your elbow. You are a biological artifact, a bridge between the soft clay of childhood and the hard ivory of the veteran. You have become the you, and the you has become you. The deformity isn't a scar, it's a signature. You are the reason the map of Europe looks the way it does, and that reason is written in the density of your marrow and the curve of your back. The time has come to unstring the bow. You feel the wood relax as the tension is released, and for a moment, your own skeleton seems to sigh in sympathy. The crushing loop of pressure through your chest and shoulders dissipates, leaving behind that familiar heavy bone boost. You wrap your gnarled hand around the stave, feeling the grain one last time. You are a specialist who has completed his task. The English warbow is no longer a weapon to be loosed. It is a weight to be carried home. The world around you is softening now, the sharp edges of the targets blurring into the deepening blue of the evening. The sounds of the village, the distant barking of a dog, the lowing of cattle, the faint clatter of a cooking pot, all slowing down, matching the steady, heavy rhythm of your own heart. You can let the tension go. Your shoulders, though broad and lopsided, are free of the weight of the king's ambitions for tonight. The mud of the field is becoming the soft grass of home, and the Sunday burn is fading into a warm, manageable glow in your joints. You are safe. You are unbroken. The long, grueling journey of your transformation is a story that has already been told. And now, it is time for the narrator to rest. Imagine the yew-stave leaning against the wall of your cottage, the hempstring coiled neatly beside it. The iron fingers are relaxing, the numbness giving way to a gentle, tingling warmth as the blood flows freely. The archery spinal curve settles into the soft hay of your bed, and the bowman's elbow finds a comfortable, neutral position. You have given everything to the bow, and in return, the bow has given you a place in history that no gun or machine can ever erase. The lights are dimming, the fan is humming softly in the background, and the weight of the story is lifting from your chest. You are no longer the soldier, you are the sleeper. Your bones are strong, your spirit is steady, and the world is quiet. Let the image of the green fields and the storm of arrows fade into a mist of peaceful, dreamless rest. Your watch is over, the targets are put away, and the wood is silent.